Gen Z, when they're organized and on TikTok, understand that responsibility. And I'm optimistic today because the task of perfecting our union, the task of defending our fundamental freedoms, it now falls to all of you. To freedom-loving Americans all across this great country. And to the good people of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania who will decide this next election and understand our unique responsibility. I love you too, and this is a moment where we all have to understand that while we'll see Kamala Harris and Tim Walz as names on the ballot, that this election isn't just about their names on this ballot. This election is about all of you. And whether or not you're willing to do this hard work to fight for our freedom, whether or not you're willing to do this hard work that started here 248 years ago. I want to just say this. I lean on my family and I lean on my faith, which calls me to serve. And I am proud of my faith. Now hear me. I'm not here to preach at y'all, but I want to tell you what my faith teaches me. My faith teaches me that no one is required to complete the task, but neither are we free to refrain from it. That means that each of us has a responsibility to get off the sidelines, to get in the game, and to do our part. Are you ready to do your part? Are you ready to form a more perfect union? Are you ready to build an America where no matter what you look like, where you come from, who you love or who you pray to, that this will be a place for you? And are you ready to look the next president of the United States in the eye and say, hell, I am too, so let's get to work.
Harris. I'm Rachel Maddow. I'm here with Chris Hayes, Nicole Ellis, and Joy Reid and Ari Melber here at MSNBC headquarters as we watch this first unveiling of the Democratic ticket. There was no real drama after President Biden decided to abandon his bid for re-election. When he endorsed Kamala Harris, the Democratic Party coalesced around her so fast, you would have thought it was preordained. There had been so much worry about a potentially messy or divisive process or a long, drawn-out process that would cause internal wounds in the Democratic Party. That did not happen, not even for 1 second when it came to the top of the ticket. Bottom of the ticket, there was a little bit of drama because there was a short list. A bunch of well-regarded, well-liked candidates, including the men who it reportedly came down to in the end, the last two, Tim Walz, who you're going to see introduced here momentarily, and the man who you just saw give an absolutely rip-roaring speech. Part of the reason that Josh Shapiro had been considered by observers to have such a good shot at this was just the logistics of this event you're watching right now. We knew that the first event unveiling the ticket, Harris and her running mate, would be in Philadelphia. If your running mate is the governor, the very well-regarded governor of Pennsylvania, that would make sense. But instead, what we got is that speech from Shapiro shouting himself hoarse in an incredible sort of call and response with the crowd. We're not going back, emerging as the sort of signature call and response from Harris campaign events now. And Shapiro showing off the oratorical skills, the stump speech skills that put him, among other reasons, but one of the reasons that put him in good stead as a potential running mate. Nicole Wallace, you've just finished 2 hours of coverage here. And we've dragged you into the after party. I'm sorry. But let me ask you, Nicole, in terms of what I was just saying, fact check me a little bit on the little bit of drama at the bottom of the ticket choice.
You know, I describe the pro-democracy coalition as the Democratic Party and all the stray cats and dogs like myself that have glommed onto it in the interest of America remaining a democracy. So with that stipulated, I think that giving Kamala Harris the space to make this first decision in the pro-democracy coalition, we want her to be the leader of the free world. She should certainly be free to make her own choice. She chose someone, I think, with whom she maybe seeks to have the kind of bond that she clearly has with President Joe Biden, which burst into public view at her first event as a candidate when she went to the campaign headquarters in Wilmington. You heard him say, "I love you, kid."
Yeah.
She said, "I love you." And I think it's that sort of understanding of what she was looking for, as well as Tim Walz's very successful campaign for this job. I didn't know who he was until she became the nominee of the Democratic Party.
I knew him as the veterans chairman in the House from when he was in Congress. That's what I knew.
And I got an email from a veteran today who said, let me tell you all these things about Tim Walz, what he did, and laws that President Obama signed into law that he championed. I think that Josh Shapiro someday will likely be a candidate or the president himself. He's extraordinary. I first interviewed him after the 2020 election. You, I believe, were quarantining. It was the peak of COVID.
Yeah.
He was booked on your show, and I had him on about the about the delayed call in Pennsylvania and all the lawsuits Trump was launching. And his son walked behind him, and he became Leslie Jones famous in the New York Minute, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's a star. He's so good. He makes people feel so good. He's so gifted. He's also very gifted at the governing part of the job, not so important to Republicans, but of epic importance to the Democratic and the pro-democracy coalition. And he really mounted a coalition campaign. He had all the prominent Republicans in the Commonwealth behind his candidacy, not that of, he ran against one of the big, Mastriano, I think one of the biggest Trump wacko birds, who was sort of ill-fated out of the gate, and it gave Shapiro a chance to mount a bipartisan campaign, and he's governed with the bipartisan support. I think he has a 61 to 65% approval rating, depending on the day in the Commonwealth.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm thinking about Shapiro having risen to become governor by defeating Mastriano, who, what is the word that you used?
There's the wackiest of the
wacko birds. That was good.
Yeah.
But, you know, with Walz, I mean, he has had a couple of successful runs for governor, but one of his runs for governor in Minneapolis was against a COVID conspiracy theorist, coming from that family of birds as well. And you can say
avian variety.
You can say that that's luck, being able to run against this sort of crazy person. But on the other hand, that's kind of the experience that you need for this national campaign.
You know, watching Shapiro there and watching Walz the last few weeks and reading his bio, I mean, one thing that's so striking is to look over the other side. We've got 39-year-old senator who's won 2 races in his life. A primary where he got Donald Trump's endorsement, which basically was the whole thing. And then he ran in a red state where he underperformed dramatically other Republicans in that state.
Where he benefited from the single largest single-person campaign donation ever made
in
to
American
Senate
history.
Campaign,
yes,
from the guy who he interned for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And who has and looking at that guy and looking at his sort of unveiling and the first 2 or 3 weeks of him on the stump. I mean, this is not a person who maybe he will learn how to do it. He doesn't know how to do politics, really.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's been quite evident. This is someone who's doing some serious on-the-job learning in front of everyone. Both Josh Shapiro and Tim Walz know how to do politics. These are people who have been who started. Josh Shapiro started very young. He's 31 and won his first House race against an incumbent Republican. Tim Walz took on an incumbent Republican. Tim Walz won a race in 2010 after he voted for the ACA and cap and trade. in a Republican district, in a race where I covered other people like Tom Perriello down in Charlottesville who got their butt kicked in that and managed to win that race. This is someone who has run a bunch of tough races. These are both people, the final two people came down to, fundamentally, alongside governing, which both they know how to do, know how to do politics in a deep way. They are battle tested. They've run tough races. They've stumped. They've knocked on doors. They've talked to volunteers. They've done all the stuff of politics. And I think it's clear that's something that the Harris campaign was looking for. The Democratic Party is very keyed into. Like, we're not going to roll out Peter Thiel's intern to come and
tell you that people who don't have children should get fewer votes.
Yeah, right.
than everybody else. Yeah, I mean and Troy, that's a very good point that Chris is making. And when Tim Walz got a football coach, it was not like he had a career in politics, but he knocked out a Republican incumbent. He was reelected 5 times. He served 6 terms. It was a rural, relatively conservative district. A Trumpy district. Once he left to run for governor, a Republican won that seat. Yeah. But he knows not only how to campaign in conservative areas, but he is a white, middle-class, rural, conservative district, grew up on a farm, veteran kind of candidate, and still has this incredible list of progressive achievements as the governor of Purple State, Minnesota.
Yeah, I love the way DEI has worked in this way. They found exactly literally the diversity and inclusion that they needed with Kamala Harris, like 100%. I mean, the thing is, if you talk, to people close to the whole process of it, that is what they were looking for. Because the way that the Harris Walz campaign is kind of framing this, it's not just past versus future, backward versus forward. It's weird versus normal. It's weird versus relatable. Yeah. And one of the things that comes most to mind about Governor Walz, he's relatable. And his policies in which that the Republicans are going to try to cast as bizarre socialist madness are like kids getting to have school nutrition. Yeah. Or, women getting to control their own bodies. He's done really pragmatic things that have actually made his state ranked one of the happiest states. It's one of the states where you have the most access to health care. He's done like cool cultural things like name a road after Prince. He's had Beyonce Day. Like, he's a normal guy that's normal to the culture, but he's also a military veteran. He was the longest serving military veteran who was in Congress. He was a moderate when he was a House member. And look, hold on, and here he is. Is that him?
Well, no, I think we'll get the video before we're going to get them watching out. But they keep doing this thing with dramatic lighting to make us.
It looks like they're going to do the Kool-Aid break through the wall thing. Oh, I don't think they will. When they zero.
He's like a sitcom dad. You know what I mean? Yeah. He's comforting and interesting, but also normy.
Can I just to reaffirm what you said about the sort of the craziness?
United States, Kamala Harris.
Oh, they're getting introduced now. Here they come. We'll be seeing them here for the first time as running mates.
Speaking of Beyonce.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Oh, it is good to be back in Pennsylvania. So let me say, on behalf of myself and the first, second gentleman of the United States, my husband, Doug Emhoff, thank you for the warm welcome. And let me just say, it's good to be here with all of the friends, all of the leaders who are here. I want to thank former Governor Ed Rendell, Senator Bob Casey, who we will re-elect this November, Senator John Fetterman, Mayor Sherelle Parker, and Chairman Jamie Harrison. And it is so good to be here with your incredible Governor, Josh Shapiro. And I will say, Josh is a dear, dear friend and an extraordinary leader. He and I have been spending a lot of time together over the years. And I told Josh, look, I am so, so invested in our friendship in doing this together, because together with Josh Shapiro, we will win Pennsylvania. We will win Pennsylvania. And I thank you, Josh. I thank you. So Philadelphia, I launched my campaign for the President of the United States a mere 2 weeks ago. And it's been a bit of a whirlwind. And just last night, the delegates to the Democratic National Convention finished voting. And so I stand before you today to proudly announce I am now officially the Democratic nominee for President of the United States. And so now we got some work to do. We need to move to the general election and win that. And to all the friends, listen, we also need to level set. We are the underdogs in this race. But we have the momentum, and I know exactly what we are up against. Now, many of you know, before I was elected vice president or elected a United States senator, I was an elected attorney general, and before that, elected district attorney. And before that, I was a courtroom prosecutor. So in those roles, I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women. Fraudsters who scammed consumers. Cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, type. campaign is not just a fight against Donald Trump. Our campaign, this campaign, is a fight for the future. It's a fight for the future. In Pennsylvania, we fight for a future with affordable housing, affordable health care, affordable child care, paid leave. We fight for a future where we build a broad-based economy, where every American has the opportunity to own a home, to start a business, and to build wealth. We fight for a future where we bring down prices that are still too high and lower the cost of living for America's families. So that they have a chance not just to get by, but to get ahead. We fight for a future where we defend our most fundamental freedoms. The freedom to vote. The freedom to be safe from gun violence. The freedom to love who you love openly and with pride. Freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body, not having her government tell her what to do. So, I love you too. So here's the thing. Since the day that I announced my candidacy, I set out to find a partner who can help build this brighter future. A leader who will help unite our nation and move us forward. A fighter for the middle class. A patriot who believes, as I do, in the extraordinary promise of America. A promise of freedom, opportunity, and justice, not just for some, but for all. So Pennsylvania, I'm here today because I found such a leader. Governor Tim Walz of the great state of Minnesota. To those who know him best, Tim is more than a governor. To his wife, Gwen, he is a husband. To his kids, Hope and Gus, he is a dad. To his fellow veterans, he is Sergeant Major Walz. To the people of southern Minnesota, for 12 years, he was congressman. To his former high school students, he was Mr. Walz. And to his former high school football players, he was Coach. And in 91 days, For some folks, they're just getting to know Coach Walz's story. And I'll tell you, he is the proud product of a middle-class family in rural Nebraska. He is a veteran who served our nation in uniform for more than 2 decades as a member of the Army National Guard, and he went to college on the GI Bill. He is someone who, long before he entered politics, worked as a teacher. When Coach Walz and his wife Gwen moved from his native Nebraska to Minnesota nearly 30 years ago, they both took jobs at the local high school. Coach Walz taught social studies, Gwen taught English. After school, Tim was the linebackers coach for the football team. Where I've heard the stories about he had a knack for using the game of football to teach life lessons. He saw the potential in kids who sometimes didn't even see it in themselves. Under those Friday night lights, Coach Walz motivated his players to believe they could achieve anything. And together, they defied the odds, hear this out, going from a winless record to the school's first ever state championship. Tim wasn't only a role model on the football field. Around that same time, Coach Walz was approached by a student in his social studies class. The young man was one of the first openly gay students at the school and was hoping to start a gay-straight alliance. At a time when acceptance was difficult to find for LGBTQ students, Tim knew the signal that it would send to have a football coach get involved. So he signed up to be the group's faculty advisor. And as students have said, he made the school a safe place for everybody. In the high school yearbook, the students voted Coach Walz the, quote, most inspiring faculty member. And as I think everyone here can see, Tim Walz was the kind of teacher and mentor that every child in America dreams of having, and that every kid deserves. The kind of coach, because he's the kind of person who makes people feel like they belong and then inspires them to dream big. And that's the kind of vice president he will be. And that's the kind of vice president America deserves. So it was Coach Walz's students who actually helped him decide to run for office. And he served 12 years in Congress, representing a purple district as he reached across the aisle to get things done. He was the highest ranking enlisted man to ever serve in the United States Congress. And the top Democrat on the Veterans Committee. And he was known as one of Capitol Hill's best marksmen, winning a bipartisan sharpshooting contest year after year. In Washington, Tim worked to raise the minimum wage, to protect the freedom of workers to join a union, and he cast one of the critical votes to pass the Affordable Care Act. Which, of course, gave health insurance to tens of millions of Americans. I'm going to tell you, when we win, Tim and I will continue to make the Affordable Care Act even stronger. We will win. Dealing with on the other side. So on that last topic, if Donald Trump gets the chance, he will end the Affordable Care Act and take us back to a time when insurance companies had the power to deny people with pre-existing conditions. You remember what that was like? Children with asthma, breast cancer survivors, grandparents with diabetes. Well, Governor Walz and I will not let that happen. Because we believe health care should be a right and not just a privilege for those who can afford it. As governor, Tim has continued to fight for working families. He secured paid leave for workers in Minnesota. And he refused as governor to allow any student in their public schools to go hungry. So he made school breakfast and lunch free for every child. And Tim Walz and I, we agree about many things, including when our middle class is strong, America is strong. And strengthening the middle class will be my defining goal as I am President of the United States. So Pennsylvania, ours is a fight for the future of the middle class, and it is a fight for freedom. In this moment, we are witnessing a full-on attack against hard-fought, hard-won freedoms and rights. Take reproductive freedom. Now think about this. Donald Trump said he wants to punish women. And as a result of his actions, today in America, 1 out of 3 women live in a state with a Trump abortion ban. 1 out of 3. Some of these bans go back to the 1800s. Even before women had a right to vote. Think about that. Well, Tim and I have a message for Trump and others who want to turn back the clock on our fundamental freedoms. We're not going back. About Tim Walz, he has shown up to stand against these attacks long before he stood on the stage with me. After Roe was overturned, he was the first governor in the country to sign a new law that enshrined reproductive freedom as a fundamental right. President of the United States, and we win majorities in the United States Congress, we will pass a bill to restore reproductive freedom, and I will proudly sign it into law. Tim Walz has also defended the sacred freedom to vote. As governor, he signed the most significant expansion of voting rights in Minnesota in over 50 years. And with Governor Walz's help, when I am president, we are going to finally pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. We're going to get it done. So Tim is a hunter and a gun owner who believes, as the majority of gun owners do, that we need reasonable gun safety laws in America. So as governor, he expanded background checks and increased penalties for illegal firearm sales. And together, when we win in November, we are finally going to pass universal background checks, red flag laws, and an assault weapons ban. Through his work, Tim, the way I think about it, he really does shine a light on a brighter future that we can build together. In his state, he has been a model chief executive, and with his experience, I'm telling you, Tim Walz will be ready on day one. In fact, when you compare his resume to Trump's running mate, well, some might say it's like a matchup between the varsity team and the JV squad. So, Pennsylvania, ultimately in this election, we each face a question. What kind of country do we want to live in? A country of freedom, compassion, and rule of law, country of chaos, fear, and hate. And here's the beauty of our democracy. We each have the power to answer that question. We each have the power to answer that question. The power is with the people. We love our country, and I believe it is the highest form of patriotism to fight for the ideals of our country. That is how we preserve the promise of America. And after all, you know, the promise of America is what makes it possible for two middle-class kids, one a daughter of Oakland, California, who was raised by a working mother, the other, a son of the Nebraska plains who grew up working on a farm. It's the promise of America, because only in America is it possible for them a country of freedom, compassion, and rule of law, or a country of chaos, fear, and hate. And here's the beauty of our democracy. We each have the power to answer that question. We each have the power to answer that question. The power is with the people. And I believe it is the highest form of patriotism to fight for the ideals of our country. That is how we preserve the promise of America. And after all, you know, the promise of America is what makes it possible for two middle-class kids, one a daughter of Oakland, California, who was raised by a working mother, the other, a son of the Nebraska plains who grew up working on a farm. It's the promise of America, because only in America is it possible for them together to make it all the way to the White House. Coach Walz and I may hail from different corners of our great country, but our values are the same. And we both believe in lifting people up, not knocking them down. He and I, we both know the vast majority of people in our country have so much more in common than what separates them. When we look at folks, we see in our fellow Americans neighbors, not enemies. Not enemies. And so my promise to you is this. Our campaign will reach out to everyone, from red states to blue states, from the heartland to the coast, in rural, urban, suburban, and tribal communities. We are running a campaign on behalf of all Americans. And when elected, we will govern on behalf of all Americans. And so, with Tim Walz by my side, and with all of you at our side, let us fight for the promise of our future. And with that, I ask Pennsylvania, are you ready to make your voices heard? Do we believe in freedom? Do we believe in opportunity? Do we believe in the promise of America? And are we ready to fight for it? And when we fight, we win. And now, welcome the next Vice President of the United States, Tim Walz.
Wow. Thank you, Philadelphia. Thank you, Madam Vice President, for the trust you put in me, but maybe more so, thank you for bringing back the joy. I'm thrilled to be on this journey with you and Doug, this incredible journey. And Pennsylvania, I know you know this, but my God, what a treasure you have in Josh Shapiro. Holy hell, can this guy bring the fire? He can bring the fire. This is a visionary leader. Also, I have to tell you, everybody in America knows when you need a bridge fixed, call that guy. And I think sometimes we forget, and you see people a little one-dimensional, but seeing a guy who cares so deeply about his family, a man with compassion, vision, and I'll have to tell you this, I know this from experience, there is no one you would rather go to a Springsteen concert in Jersey with than him. Than that guy. Roots. And I can't wait for all of you and America to get to know my incredible wife, Gwen, a 29-year public school educator. Don't ever underestimate teachers. And our two beautiful kids, Hope and Gus. I couldn't be prouder to be on this ticket and to help Vice President Harris become what we all know is very, very good for us to think about. Next President of the United States of America. From her first day as a prosecutor, as a district attorney, Attorney General of the great state of California, a United States Senator, and Vice President of the United States. Vice President Harris has fought on the side of the American people. She took on the predators. She took on the fraudsters. She took down the transnational gangs. She stood up against powerful corporate interests, and she never hesitated to reach across the aisle if it meant improving people's lives. And I want all of you to hold this, and don't ever underestimate the power of this. She does it all with a sense of joy. I know a little something about that commitment to people. I was born in West Point, Nebraska. I lived in Butte, a small town of 400, where community was a way of life. Growing up, I spent the summers working on the family farm. My mom and dad taught us, show generosity towards your neighbors and work for a common good. My dad served in the Army during the Korean War. And with his encouragement, at 17, I joined the Army National Guard. For 24 years, I proudly wore the uniform of this nation. The National Guard gave me purpose. It gave me the strength of a shared commitment to something. And now, as governor of the great state of Minnesota, I bring those experiences to bear in tackling the challenges that are facing our great state. Minnesota's strength comes from our values, our commitment to working together, to seeing past our differences, to always being willing to lend a helping hand. Those are the same values I learned on the family farm and tried to instill in my students. I took it to Congress and to the state capitol, and now Vice President Harris and I are running to take those very values to the White House. Now, Donald Trump sees the world a little differently than us. First of all, he doesn't know the first thing about service. He doesn't have time for it because he's too busy serving himself. Again and again and again, Trump weakens our economy to strengthen his own hand. He mocks our laws. He sows chaos and division. And that's to say nothing of his record as president. He froze in the face of the COVID crisis. He drove our economy into the ground. And make no mistake, violent crime was up under Donald Trump. That's not even counting the crimes he committed. You know, some of us are, some of us in here are old enough to remember. I see you down there. I see those old white guys. Some of us are old enough to remember when it was Republicans who were talking about freedom. It turns out now what they meant was the government should be free to invade your doctor's office. In Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and their personal choices that they make. Even if we wouldn't make the same choice for ourselves, there's a golden rule. Mind your own damn business. These guys are after my heart chanting, mind your own damn business. That feels good, so thank you. Look, that includes IVF, and this gets personal for me and my family. When my wife and I decided to have children, we spent years going through infertility treatments. And I remember praying every night for a call for good news. The pit in my stomach when the phone rang, and the agony when we heard that the treatments hadn't worked. So it wasn't by chance that when we welcomed our daughter into the world, we named her Hope. When Vice President and I talk about freedom, we mean the freedom to make your own health care decisions. And for our children to be free to go to school without worrying they'll be shot dead in their classrooms. By the way, as you heard, I was one of the best shots in Congress, but in Minnesota, we believe in the Second Amendment, but we also believe in common sense gun violence laws. Vice President Harris' idea of freedom is a ticket for education to be that ticket to the middle class, not crippling debt. Air that's clean, water that's pure, communities that are safe. A place where we settle our political differences not through violence, but with our votes. And that's what this election's about. What direction will this country go in? He's not going back. Well, Donald Trump would damn sure take us backwards. Let's be clear about that. And don't believe him when he plays dumb. He knows exactly what Project 2025 will do to restrict our freedoms. To rig the economy to help the super rich. If Trump gets a chance to return, he's going to pick up exactly where he left off 4 years ago. Only this time, it will be much, much worse. Raising costs on middle-class family. He will repeal the Affordable Care Act, no doubt about it. He'll gut Social Security and Medicare. And when somebody tells you they believe him. He said he'd ban abortion across this country, and he'll not. Donald Trump's not fighting for you or your family. He never sat at that kitchen table like the one I grew up at, wondering how we were going to pay the bills. He sat at his country club in Mar-a-Lago, wondering how he can cut taxes for his rich friends. And I got to tell you, his running mate shares his dangerous and backward agenda for this country. J.D. Vance literally wrote the foreword for the architect of the Project 2025 agenda. Like all regular people I grew up with in the heartland, J.D. studied at Yale, had his career funded by Silicon Valley billionaires, and then wrote a bestseller trashing that community. Come on! That's not what middle America is. And I got to tell you, I can't wait to debate the guy. That is if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. So, you see what I did there? I got to tell you, pointing out just an observation of mine that I made. I just have to say it. You know it, you feel it. These guys are creepy, and yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see. That's what you see. So you know what's out there, so say it with me. We aren't going back. We aren't going back. We are not going back. So we got 91 days. My God, that's easy. We'll sleep when we're dead. Over those next 91 days and every day in the White House, I'll have Vice President Harris's back. Every single day. That is if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. So, you see what I did there? Look. I got to tell you, pointing out just an observation of mine that I made. I just have to say it. You know it, you feel it. These guys are creepy, and yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see. That's what you see. So you know what's out there, so say it with me. We aren't going back. We aren't going back. We are not going back. So we got 91 days. My God, that's easy. We'll sleep when we're dead. Over those next 91 days and every day in the White House, I'll have Vice President Harris's back. Every single day. And we'll have yours. You know how this works. We can't do it alone. We need you, each and every one of you. Go over to KamalaHarris.com, get on board, because we need you. Freedom to make our own choices. This leader, this compassionate, careful, joyous leader believes in each and every one of you. My God, you came here tonight to sit at the very top because you love this country and you're not going back. She believes in the opportunity for every single person to join the middle class. She believes in the promise of America. We just got to fight. We just got to fight. Because as soon-to-be President Harris says, when we fight, we win. Thank you, Philadelphia. Thank you, Vice President. God bless
the Democratic presidential ticket, Vice President Kamala Harris, her newly announced running mate, the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, their respective spouses, America's first ever second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, and Gwen Walz, who, as Governor Walz just put it in his speech, 29-year public school educator in Minnesota. They are speaking at a capacity crowd, what actually I think might be a beyond capacity crowd, at Temple University in Philadelphia. The campaign tells us there are more than 12,000 people at this event. You heard Governor Walz ad-libbing there, shouting out to the people at the top, you came here to sit way up there, because you know we're not going back. Before the two of them spoke, this crowd went absolutely bananas for Pennsylvania's governor, for Josh Shapiro, who after all came very close to being named the vice presidential running mate himself. The crowd went bananas as Shapiro gave a rip-roaring speech before this very, very fired-up crowd. Then the nominee herself, Kamala Harris, gave remarks in detail, introducing America to a figure who is popular in his home state, but not widely known outside of it. Vast majority of Americans saying today, in the instant polling done upon his selection as her vice presidential running mate, vast majority of Americans saying they don't have an opinion of him because they do not know him. She taking the time today in her remarks to introduce him in detail, and then her newly announced running mate himself giving the kind of speech that shows why she picked him. The two of them appearing together as a ticket for the first time right now. They will do multiple swing states in a fast-moving, very condensed tour for the rest of this week.